Today on the Idiot's Guide, we're talking about, are you a sucker for those adorable puppy dog eyes? I mean, like a superpower, especially when it comes to draining our wallets of anything resembling money. Maybe it's time for an allowance. And do your neighbors smell? I'm sure they do, but not nearly as bad as the funeral home that the neighbors reported smelling funny. You know, the kind of funny smell that 190 decomposing bodies makes. Nasty. I'm your host, Adam Richardson, aka the Profit Hacker, and I'm joined by the man in charge, Mr. Joe Haslam. Welcome to the Idiot's Guide. So I think I want to start this episode off like this. I got the luxury of getting an allowance when I was a kid. And, I use the word luxury because the idea of allowance, did you get allowance when you were? English was not really a important thing, No, it varies between parents and parenting styles and how you were raised and, what you're going to do for your kids and that kind of stuff. But this episode, I think, one of our goals isn't to teach kids how to, perfect those puppy dog eyes or how to exact all of the money from your parents' bank account. But it's also kind of on two sides of this. Speaking to the parents about if the question is, should I give an allowance? What is a good allowance amount? And, those sorts of things. How do I administer that? And then for the kids' side, coming from parents, what are we looking for? What are things that we want to be able to make it so that we consider an allowance something worth talking about? And I think that there's a lot of kind of nuances to this. And, like I said, I got an allowance when I was a kid, but it didn't come easy. And it honestly was not in the sense of I was supposed to say like comparable, like no, not even close. So I guess, Joe, what about you? What's your experience growing up as far as allowance?
So growing up, we didn't get an allowance, but we did get paid for certain chores. So household chores, like inside the house, you didn't get paid for. It's like cleaning dishes, things like that. But we did get paid. I think it was $5 to mow the lawn. I think so. We had a front lawn and a back lawn, so I think it was $5 per lawn, and so it was a total of $10 potential. So that's what we were told we were being paid. And then my dad inevitably every time would say, if I owe you money, you'll never be broke. And so we never saw a dime of that $5 for mowing the lawn. But my dad owes me plenty of money, so I'll never be broke.
I would grow up like making sure everyone signs a contract.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where, it's funny to think about it now, but I didn't grow up with a lot of means. And so my parents probably just didn't have the money to be able to actually give it to us. But it was a way to motivate us to actually do something.
Sure.
And pretty clever of my dad to come up with that phrase. But, having, it doesn't take a lot. And I know inflation, 20, 30 years ago is very different from today's $5 or $10. But learning how to manage money young is really important. Now, I am an odd duck. I have been managing money since I could basically read. And so one of my earliest memories is being at the grocery store with my dad, and he was getting corn or green beans or something. I just remember it was on the canned produce aisle, and he went to grab one, and I told him he was getting the wrong one because the price per ounce was more expensive on that one than it was on the other one.
I point that out with my kids when I go shopping to them.
Yeah.
Is that's something that I pay attention to. Is I'm like, okay, price. Even when it's on sale, I'm like, okay, like, does this sale make this one cheaper than that one, sort of a
Right.
thing.
And so that is from the time I was a little kid. I've been managing money, which I mean, it makes sense. You know, that I became an accountant and business owner, but
The tooth fairy comes and you're like, is there a mutual fund that I can put this into so that it will grow and expand into my future, parents?
when
my
I
future.
was, I think I was in, it was first or second grade. I think it was second grade. A friend of mine was an artist. You know, actually, I mean, he was a very good artist for second grade for even an adult. And so he was doodling or drawing up some bookmarks one day and was just giving them out to friends. And so he and I sat down and we actually came up with a business model to sell his bookmarks
Wow.
to the other kids at school. And so in second grade, I was already creating my empire.
I grew up with my parents owned their own business, and so I grew up kind of in that entrepreneurial world. And so when it came to wanting money, I wasn't reliant on an allowance. Like I did get one, but I learned early that it was more valuable for me to find means to make money. And it wasn't your lemonade stand. Like those
Yeah.
as kids I would do, but honestly it was more like, establishing a lawn care service for the neighborhood.
Yeah. You know, lawn mowing. I remember I was horrible at it.
Trash pickup, leaf, snow, all that kind of stuff.
I had a lady down the street from us. She worked at a realty firm. And so she hired me to be her IT guy. So this was back in the days when computers were new. And so most people can type really well on computers. And so it was doing a lot of the computer work for her. I was horrible at it. But, I was probably 12. And here I am working in a professional office doing typing. You find, and this kind of goes along with what we talked about last week, is you fill your time. You find ways to fill your time. Now, you and I were particularly motivated. Not everyone has that self-motivation.
I would even say generationally, most of this generation we're raising it's fewer and farther between that you're finding those motivations.
I think that's a bias.
Okay.
Going back a few
fair
episodes
enough.
ago. And I think that's a bias because as our age, the people that we choose to be around are the people who are like-minded to us. And so we are around people who are also motivated and all that. And then when we look at this generation, we're looking at it through the eyes of our kids or through the media, which isn't necessarily our choice of who we're around. And we're seeing more examples of it. But I think there are plenty of examples from our generation of, just people that weren't motivated like we are. If our generation was really more motivated than the younger generations, we would have a lot more entrepreneurs than we really do, but we don't.
Right.
I think every generation has roughly the same quantity, same percentage of kids that are motivated, people that are motivated, and unmotivated, or somewhere along that spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, even between my two boys, my oldest, he wants to go get a job. He's motivated in that sense, so he went and got a job. Yeah. Before that, though, like for him to be like in like thinking of ways of making money, like I'd give him instructions on how to do it, and he wouldn't make a dime. Like he would like clam up, or if it had to mean that he had to talk to somebody about picking weeds, it was just one, talking to another human, two, touching dirt, like three, where do you throw it away? I'm like, the trash. Like that sounds hard. I quit. Like just the thought was enough for him to be overwhelmed.
Well, and I think part of that is, when we look at little kids, It is, we give them everything. They're cute. And so we want to do everything for them. They give you their puppy dog eyes.
Yep.
And you want to do everything for them. I am the worst. All of my kids know that if they look at me the right way, say the right thing, I will melt and give them whatever they want.
I try not to carry cash for that reason.
Oh, it's awful. It is awful. Because all my kids have, their own bank accounts that are tied to ours. And so it's like, oh, okay, here's $20.
Yeah.
It's so hard to be disciplined, to say no as a parent.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we need to do more of, is saying no, that no, I'm not going to get you this, in order to teach kids how to value money as well as work for something. Now, I'm not saying that they have to work 80 hours a week and they're going to become the next Steve Jobs and all this. No, I'm just talking about they learn how to work from a very young age. And you start that 5-6 years old, which seems really young to give them an allowance, but there are things that a 5 or 6 year old wants that we just generally pay for. You go out of town on a trip and they see some shiny bauble that they want, and so you buy it for them. They're 5 or 6. Yeah, they don't have money. But if you were to work with them and not buy it for them, but if they have a set amount of money that they get every week, say, at 5 years old, maybe $1 a week or something. And then they learn, okay, we are going on a trip in 4 weeks. And so if you want to buy anything, you have to start saving your money now. And so they learn that reward for future, or that future reward by disciplining themselves today. And that starts really young. And that's something that, because kids are cute, we don't start out with. We wait until they're 15 years old, when they're rotten, nasty teenagers, to start saying, no, I'm going to start restricting and changing the way that I'm parenting based on everything that I've done for the last 15 years.
I want to add the word horrible to that list of
adjectives for teenagers. I think we could probably spend an entire podcast of just listing descriptive words of teenagers.
Stay tuned.
That would be the most boring thing in the world, but it would all be true.
It would be.
Teenagers are the key to humanity. I know we talk bad about
teenagers. We could really get some good radio announcement, interviews. I could go around with a camera and just ask general public, what's a descriptive for
there you go.
A teenager?
And we do, knock down teenagers a lot. We do it jokingly. So any teenagers listening, you hopefully know that you don't get along with your parents, and parents and teenagers always think the other one is horrible. But we do it jokingly. But honestly, teenagers are the secret to humanity's success. As scary as some adults may take that, it's true. And I've got the math to prove it.
Well,
but going back to this is, we've got 15 years of this kid is used to getting everything. And all of a sudden, because they've turned 15 or 14 or 16, whatever it is, we're suddenly restricting everything.
Yeah.
And saying, no, you now have to get a job for that. It's just such a sudden change, just slamming into a brick wall for a lot of these kids.
For my kids, a lot of it, even from pretty early on, it was always, I never gave them anything for chores, like household chores regularly. They all have their responsibilities, and I have some tips and stuff like that that'll kind of dive into that a little bit deeper. But for extra things, like, hey, I need you to get all of the leaves raked in the backyard. Like, I'll pay this much an hour for you to do that. So, my suggestion is take as long as you can, because then you will milk dad for as much as he has, And so,
but you've got to balance it, because if you go too slow, you're going to piss him off and he's not going to pay you anymore. If you go too fast, you make too little money. And this is the exact thing, is just finding that balance.
Right.
in a work environment. What is the right way? And learning that at 7 years old is so much better than learning it at 17.
One of the things, like the first tip that this thing that I have here is it talks about don't just give kids money and expect them to grow up to be responsible financial citizens. So, a lot of times if they see you just like it, just money's there. All of a sudden, this is you. Oh, you want that? Yeah, here, poof. Oh, you wanted to go do this, poof. And I don't mind, being the source of their ability to have activities, their ability to have family fun things. But if it's like, man, you need the next game console and just poof, it's there. It doesn't really teach them anything of value to get there. And so I have a hard time with that. Kind of an example of that for me lately is my now 13-year-old. So now I have two teens in my house. He just recently asked for a computer, for like a gaming computer so he could play. He's heard from all of his friends it's way better than a game console to use a computer to play Fortnite on. So I'm like, oh, neat. This is the beginning of a big problem. But he came to me and he's like, I want to save my money. I want to earn this much money so that I can pay for this. Well, then he found one that was on sale and he's like, oh shoot, how do I get this right now? I don't have a right now. So he came to me with a proposition and he's like, if you get this and I make these payments in this time frame, so I have like a length of time. It's not a signed agreement with him, but he knows like it'll be my computer if he doesn't. So I'm the repo man, and I have no grace period.
And that's exactly it. I mean, he came to you with an option for a loan because he found a really good deal on something. He was saving for it, found a really good deal. He's going to go get a personal loan from dad in order to go and get this.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people look down on personal loans or things like that. There are times when you need them. Obviously, saving is the first option. But when you come across a good deal, sometimes if it's something you need or want, in this case, it's a want, but then at those times, it may be a good option to go and do that. But here your kid is coming to you with a loan agreement. He's learning
13.
about lending. He's learning about financing.
He's the one that would read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, where my oldest is not.
Yeah.
He will go get a job. I'm a Rich Dad, Poor Dad kind of mindset. So I'm the one that's like, I wonder how many businesses I can operate at 13 years old.
Exactly.
Like who could I employ in the neighborhood and they not notice that they're actually being employed by a teenager? Like that's where my brain goes. But my oldest is the other way. Like, but he did something. He had a goal in mind. He wanted to get something. He worked, he saved. And when he got to that point, it was actually $100 less than he had saved for because it went on sale. And he's like, boom, I can buy buy this with it, kind of a thing. And so it was really cool to see them kind of work with, the different goal setting that they wanted in order to achieve what they wanted.
Yeah. And the younger you start with this, the better it is. And that's the advice to both parents and to kids. Any kids that are listening or watching this, if you've got something in mind, create a plan. When it comes to starting a business, you create a business plan. Mm-hmm. When you want to go get a loan, you create a loan plan. All these things are established so that you can get what you want. And so when you go and you show, I'm going to do this, this, and this, these are the terms, this is what's going to happen, then you have a much better chance of accomplishing that. And parents, when your kid comes to you with something like that, reward that kind of behavior. Because by rewarding that behavior, what you're doing is encouraging that cognitive thinking, that critical thinking process. You're creating new neural pathways that are going to help them to develop better skills as an adult, to manage money, to budget money, all those things. And by rewarding those behaviors, you're strengthening that entire well-rounded picture.
One of the things about an allowance that this article kind of talks about is don't tie allowance to regular household responsibilities.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that, I mentioned that. Main reason why was because You have a little bit of kind of self pride that kicks in when you've completed some of these tasks. But a household, like if I think about the chores that I do, I'm not paid to do, but they're a contribution to the household.
Right.
And there's kind of a mutual tribalism that takes place in that makes it so that every part of that household or tribe is a contributing portion to the best of the household. And then these extra things is where you can really negotiate. However, that has bit me as well because like the leaves or something else, I remember a while back I had a giant pile of dirt that I was moving from somewhere to somewhere on my property, and both my oldest boys, I'm like, you guys are young, like you guys are strapping, your back's not going to hurt 15 minutes in, that kind of stuff. Get to work, like, and my both of them are like, how much will you pay me? And then I'll be like, I think it's worth this much. I don't think it's worth that much. I think it's worth much more than that. And I'm like, who are you? Go away. Freaking shark.
They're negotiating. But and those extra chores being paid for those, but I am also an advocate of a standard weekly or monthly allowance. They get X amount for just being a member of the household. And so, because a 10-year-old can't go out and get a job, per
Right.
se. I mean, certain things they can do. They can do a lemonade stand, but you got to watch out because some people, if you don't have that sales tax license or that business license, you're going to get that lemonade stand shut down no matter how cute you are. It's amazing how many times that happens.
I've seen it, yeah.
But so they don't really have a way of doing that. And so, but you can't just give them money and not your 15-year-old. So we cut it off at 18. Once you're 18, then you don't get an allowance anymore. But even if they have a job, even if they're going out getting a job, they still get their weekly allowance. And it's because it's just part of being able to learn how to spend money. And parents, they will fail for the first while, probably 6 months to a year. They will get their allowance and then they will spend it. They will lose all of it. And
True.
you have to be okay with that. Because it is better that they learn how to fail with money management when they're 12 than when they're 20.
True.
Because that 20-year-old is going to go out, they're going to get a job, they're at college or out in life, and this is the first time that they have a lot of excess money. They're not paying for, their money's not just going to rent, just going to food. And so they have extra money and they are going to blow it.
Yeah.
And it's just going to go away. And now they're 20 years old and getting into a worse state. They're getting offered credit cards. And so they think, hey, free money, this is great. And they're going to go blow all their money. And now they're going to be in huge credit card debt. It is better that they learn how to fail at money management at 12 years old. And you have to let them. Because they're going to go out, they're going to get their allowance. Let's say it's $10 a week. They're going to go and they're going to spend that $10. And then on Wednesday, they're going to say, I really wanted that bauble, but I don't have any money left because I spent it all on candy on Saturday. And so they start to learn. And then the next week, they get their $10 and they spend it on that bauble that they wanted. And then come Tuesday, they're like, oh, I wanted candy. I don't have anything left. And so they will start to develop and learn these skills of, okay, I saw what happened those last 2 times. I spent all my money right away to get candy and I couldn't get that toy I wanted.
Yeah.
So the next time I spent all my money on that toy and then I didn't have any candy. So their little brains are going to start thinking, how can I make this work? And so they're going to say, well, maybe I'll only spend half my money. And then I'll have half in case something comes up. And so they're going to spend half of it on candy. And then the other half comes around and there's nothing that they want to buy the next week. Ooh, I've got extra money. I'm going to buy lots of candy. They waste it all and they don't get the toy that they want the next week. And all of these things are so important because they are building neural pathways. They are learning how to develop, how to critically think about how to spend money in a very simplistic way. It's very simplistic in a 12-year-old mind or an 8-year-old mind. But they're learning how to develop, and then those simplistic bases then build into a much more complex, comprehensive money management style.
My middle son is the one that negotiated the contract with me. He is much more savvy when it comes to it. He's always like growing up with his older brother. Like I swear, like I'm gonna guess like the Bible story of Jacob and Esau. That's a very good example because he's got like contractually bound. His older brother probably owes him in the thousands of all the money because he would always save all of this. He'd save everything he had, and his older brother would be like, "Hey, do you can like I really want to get this thing, but I need a couple more bucks." And it's like every couple weeks it's this. I was like, I don't know where he's getting all of this money, but he seems to have a lot of it. And so like it's crazy because it always like I'm like, what are you doing, son? Are you stealing this money? He's just really good with it. He just doesn't find a need for it.
Yep. Save your Christmas money, save your birthday money, sell bookmarks on the side.
And we don't necessarily do an allowance because I mean like there are so much that we pay for that it's more about the fact that on a regular basis, almost weekly, there is something we're talking about for them, for their benefits. And so, I think that's one of the things that it talks about here is talking about it. And maybe, having the conversation to say like, why is this? This last week, my boys were going to a snow camp with our church, and they're going up to a cabin and all that kind of stuff. And, we're talking about covering the costs about how to do that. And my oldest, all of a sudden, he's like, "Can I go?" And I was like, "Well, I wasn't planning on you going." Like he goes, "That's okay. I'd love to go if I can. If you can help, I'll pay for half of it." I was like, "Are you sure?" He's like, "Yeah, I can do that." I was like, "Literally, that's like almost all of his paycheck that's coming in." So I'm like, that's a pretty good, a willingness. He's happy to spend money. His first paycheck was he learned what. Not Uber Eats, DoorDash.
Yeah.
He's like, "Oh, they had a promo code, so I got a couple free ones." And then they got expensive like instantly. And he ran out of money. Boom, it was gone.
Failure happens. And you would much rather them fail at 15 than at 20. And that's the big thing here is they've got to learn how to failure. Failure is the first step to success.
Yep.
It is. You have to fail because you're going to learn, you're going to be able to grow, you're going to be able to develop because of those failures. But, talking about, where that money is going to, being able to manage that money, the more that they can control that, the more that they're cognizant of what is my money actually going to? What is my parents' money actually going to? Mm-hmm. That makes a big difference. Cell phones. If you start a kid out at 8 years old with an allowance, and then they turn 12 and they say, "All of my friends have cell phones. Can I have one?" Now, aside that, when should kids have cell phones? We're going to put that to the side right now. But let's say you're okay with it. You put parental controls, all those things on it. Well, you tell them, if you want a cell phone, it's coming from your allowance. And so now if they want that cell phone, they're going to get less spending money, which is exactly what happens to adults.
Yep.
I want something, that means I'm going to have less somewhere else. And so it teaches them that when they want something desperately that is keeping up with the Joneses, it's going to mean that you have to cut back somewhere else. This happens a lot when you've got neighborhoods and you see someone else put up all these fancy things around their house and you're like, "Ooh, I really want that. I want to be the cool person on the block." And a lot of people get into really bad debt because they're keeping up with the Joneses.
Well, and I think, what you were saying about like, well, do I want this or do I want this sort of things, and helping them make those choices is kind of a simplified budgeting system.
Yeah.
You're not telling them, hey, you need to allot this much money for groceries and this much for, phone bill or car payments or whatever you have. You're just saying, okay, do you want candy or do you want a new phone? Like,
Yeah.
And they're drastically different in price, but it's one of those things that even if you say like, hey, I want you to pitch in a little bit for the phone payment, we'll add the line to our plan, and then, like have you pitch in a little bit to that payment. Is that something you're willing to do? With my kids, I never really did that, but the budgeting side of it is kind of where like my son coming and talking about, well, I can make payments over the course of this period of time. I'm like, well, then now you have a future goal that you've already set forward with this. My oldest did something, he just did it the other way around where he saved up to that. So his goal was down the line, knowing that if he stuck true to this, he's going to succeed. He's going to get what he wants. And that's, a real good basic form of what we do every day when we go to work.
Exactly. And that's the idea, is that you want to start young teaching kids, and an allowance is a great way to do that. You supplement the allowance. So give them, X amount every week for just being alive and in the house. And then you supplement that with extras, mowing the lawns, raking the leaves, whatever it is, chores that you really don't like doing. Then you supplement that with those, and they can make extra money. They're doing gig jobs at that point. And they're learning how to be able to work harder to get more, getting an education. So as they get older, so growing up, we had to, if we wanted a car, we had to be able to pay for the insurance. And so if we had to get a job before we could get a car, and it had to make enough to be able to pay for that. So for the first while, parents are driving you to your job so you can make enough money. But I wanted a car. And so my dad found a really cheap $500 truck that barely ran. And so he and I spent, I think 6 months underneath that truck rebuilding it. And so it was great. I love the memories of those times rebuilding that truck with my dad, because it was just a lot of fun. I'm not a mechanic by any stretch of the imagination. Now a lot of my dad is a mechanic. My brother's a mechanic. They've gone into those careers. It was not something that I ever wanted to do. Again, starting from a very young age, I was destined to be an accountant. But it's something that now, because my dad did that, because we got a really cheap truck, and it's something that we then rebuilt, put money into, that could be afforded by a guy working part-time fast food. Now I know how to repair vehicles. I'm still going to go to the mechanic shop when it's a serious thing, but if I need to replace the brakes, I know how. If I'm ever in dire financial straits and I can't afford to go to a mechanic shop to pay for it, to have someone else do that for me, I can.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because it all started with that financial management side, being able to pay for things that I want.
Yeah.
Now, my dad took a lot of time out to do that. He could have been doing a lot of other things, but those are skills that have carried forward for a long time.
Do you think you felt bad because he always promised money and never gave it to you?
Maybe that's
like, I was contractually bound to do this. Sorry, son.
There you go. I paid my tuition with mowing lawns of how to repair vehicles.
I'm going to run through these real quick. Just, like my thought with this is we've actually covered pretty much all of it in our conversation here. But just to reiterate, these are really good things like that. I think you and I are in very much agreement on how this stuff is, there's not an exact science to it, but these are good recommendations.
Now, I am going to say these things work.
Yeah.
Now, those who've listened know that I'm a foster parent, so kids that come into my home are generally older. One of my kids, she had no idea how to use money. Mm-hmm. She came into our home when she was 17. No idea how to manage money at all. She got her first allowance. I think she got a stipend from the state for, she's a little bit developmentally delayed. And so she gets some SSI funds from the state for that because she can't work. When she started getting that, the first time she got that money, she spent like $600 in a week. I don't even think it was a week. I think it was like $600 in like 3 days. But that was a few years ago. And now she manages her money. And she fell into the DoorDash problem, wanting to get that DoorDash going. But over time, and, it took a year and a half, and she's still working on it. But that time frame, she learned how to properly budget. If she wanted something later, she knew to set aside money. She now saves a little bit of what she gets every month so that she can, in case, be able to buy something. Mm-hmm. And so it is something that it works even in someone that age.
Yeah.
And so imagine starting so much younger when they're able to utilize those skills and develop them over an extra 10 years to be able to develop that. And so these things do work. We're not just spouting some stuff off the internet that we've never tried before. These are real skills. These are real techniques that really work.
A lot of parents, our parents did it, parents all over the place. We're in agreement on this. So there's got to be more of a common thread of this than not.
Yeah. And so if you're skeptical at all, look this stuff up. As a parent, if you're skeptical about giving an allowance, it's really not going to be that big of a deal. The worst thing you can actually do is give your kids everything and never give them an allowance, because that's no restrictions.
Yeah.
They don't learn how to restrict. And then they just become a rich snob.
Entitled little snob. Brats,
And those kids are horrible.
Yes.
Because they have no idea. And then they think everyone else is below them.
I joked about teenagers being horrible, but those kids are absolutely horrible.
They're the worst. So I'll let you go with yours now, but I just wanted to push that out there and say these are real techniques that really work. And it's important that we apply them.
And keep in mind, I've already said a couple of these, so I'm just going to go back over and so you'll hear the same ones, but that what we've just talked about in the last half an hour has really is a general overview of great principles to look at when you're considering, even for your little ones, a kind of an allowance for them so that they can learn and develop good skills that we use as adults constantly. That is the epitome of our life, is to find means of managing enough money to sometimes it's to barely stay afloat, to feed our families, and sometimes it's to be responsible and build a legacy, and from everything in between. But so the idea of the first one we talked about was, don't just give your kids money and expect them to be financially responsible. The second one is don't tie it to regular household responsibilities like chores. Kind of take that from the tribe. We all contribute to the tribe mutually, and then the extra things is where you can really take a better look at it. Third is talk about it. Don't be scared of having a conversation about money. Even in the hard times, it's important because then your kids have a better appreciation for what money can and can't do, and how much really it can and can't rule in our life,
And they'll surprise you with how resilient they can be in coming up with creative ideas for doing activities or doing things that don't cost money.
Or being patient when you have to say, no, we can't, and they understand better because they have a greater understanding of in that time, we couldn't.
Yeah. They're smart. If you just say no, they just think you're being mean.
Yep.
But if you give them the reason and help them to understand, so much better.
Number 4, decide on an amount. So you don't really have, there's no rule, there's nothing. It's really to your budget, your extent, but maybe incrementally grow that over the years so that it's there. 5 is create a very simple budgeting system. Simple meaning, do I buy candy with my money, or do I buy a race car or a Barbie doll, whatever you want,
And keep it age appropriate.
Do I want to buy Christmas presents for my family members? Number 6, automate or routinize the payments. Like you said, kind of like a weekly. So they can look forward to each week having this little amount that contributes to their overall well-being. Number 7, let them make mistakes. So part of making mistakes is feeling consequences. My 7-year-old right now is grounded this week, as of this week of the recording. She's grounded not because of of an allowance thing or that behavior wise, but the way she's grounded, she gets frustrated and she's like, oh, and then I have to remind her. I was like, hey, I just a reminder, you're still grounded. And then she's like, bah, and throws a fit. I'm like, man, that's part of the grounding is feeling like how that feels to lose those privileges. Huh? That's not fun, huh? So she's really getting like, she's like, I better fix this now. Number 8 is give optional opportunities to make money. Some people are good about this. My oldest, he's terrible at being creative about money, but wants to go get a job. So that's why he's employed at 15 years old, because he will absolutely put a shirt and tie on and go apply for a job. And he does great at the jobs that he does. My middle son, he is an entrepreneur. He wants to start a print on demand business online and start doing this. And I'm like, you're 13 and you're going to start a business empire that's going to make more money than your dad,
How do I invest in his plans here?
Well, we could talk. I'm currently working on training him so that he understands what it takes. But he has now a laptop to be able to do it all. So he's not restricted at this point to where he can't go out and get it. And so those are just kind of like a rough. There's eight here on this chart, and it's nothing fancy, but it's something that just kind of gives an overall good point of view or good perspective to share. But I think one of the things that I'm going to transition over, but I want to make sure that you get a couple more cents in if you want. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I for any young people listening, this is, if we've got 6-year-olds listening to this podcast, I might question what they're doing listening to this, especially as of a couple of podcast episodes ago. But if there are any young people listening, take these things and practice these ideas. And by practicing with your birthday money, with your Christmas money, with money that you make from anything, by practicing at that, you can prove to your parents that it is a good investment in your future for them to give you an allowance. Okay. Do a PowerPoint presentation, or is it slides now on Google that everyone uses? Do a Google slide presentation. PowerPoint was our generation. They don't do PowerPoint.
You can still PowerPoint.
It's still there. It's just no kids do that. But do these things that show that you are responsible and that you want this as part of your life, and recognize sometimes parents don't have money. And so, be open with that conversation too. If you're from a family that does not have a lot of money, you may not get an allowance. You may have a dad who says, if I owe you, you'll never be broke. And so be okay with that, because let me tell you, you can still be successful later in life if you have that. But take some of these same skills if you don't get an allowance, if you do get an allowance, and apply it. Try to convince your parents to give you an allowance, because it's going to teach you. It's not always going to work, but give it a try. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And so work hard at it, work hard at life. Parents, if you can, try to use these techniques. Again, it doesn't take a lot of money. $5 a week, $10 a week. It's something that you can then show to them. And honestly, if it's for chores that you're doing once a week, like mowing the lawn, pay them $5 to mow the lawn. You just got an hour back of your life to be able to go do something fun. And it cost you $5. It's a whole lot cheaper than hiring a lawn mowing service, let me tell you.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the things that you're looking at is, as a parent, see ways that by passing this off, you may be out a little bit more money, but maybe your stress levels are a little bit easier. Maybe your outlook on your kids' lives is going to be better. So keep those things in mind as you're looking at an allowance.
Yeah. I think one of the things that is also important to stress is try not to just it's not a try not to. Don't go down the road of any illegal means to make money. My example would be, I'm not even going to give you examples because I don't even want to give those ideas out, except for two: money laundering and forgery. The reason why I bring those up is because a couple from Colorado that own a funeral home were arrested actually in Wagoner, Oklahoma. They own the funeral home in Colorado, just south of Colorado Springs, and they were arrested because in their facility that was reported for some kind of a foul smell, nearly two. I see that. Nearly 200 decaying corpses were found improperly stored at the facility. So, I mean, gross. Ew. Okay. Owners of Return to Nature Funeral Home. So, in Colorado, it is legal to have a natural burial, which means that they might put you in a pine box. But, some way they're looking at earth decomposition.
It's going to be, you're covered in a decompostable cloth. You're put in an untreated coffin. So it's not pressure treated. It's not any chemicals in it.
Right.
So that it will. The reason I know this is because this is how I want to be buried. I want a natural burial.
I want to be a tree pod. You know, the ones where you're like the base of a tree?
Yes.
All of a sudden you're like this beautiful tree and you're like, you're eating my fruit. Yeah.
That's right. We are all cannibals. But no, I really love these natural burials. There's no embalming fluid. And so you are perfectly capable of decomposing and helping nature through your passing.
So this couple, they were arrested for 4 felony charges, including abuse of a corpse, theft, money laundering, and forgery, according to a statement from the district attorney for Colorado's 4th District. $2 million bond set for this couple. And basically what had happened is they weren't really sure. They just noticed that it started to really smell bad. And when they went to investigate, they found all of these bodies just there. And they weren't stored in anything. They were just stacked. And so, I can't believe that they could even get away with that for such a length of time to where you have decomposition actually starting. In order to have a nature or a natural burial, you have it's like a 24-hour window before you have to be refrigerated. So otherwise you lose that opportunity. You can't. You have to do other means or services, and one of those is crematorium. And so this funeral home actually got into a big old argument with the crematorium service that they were working with and severed the agreement all the way back in November. And so what they had found is even in the decomposition, which they figured out ways of determining the identity of these bodies by fingerprints that were still there and that kind of stuff, which is really disturbing, but gross. Yeah. But families that had gotten ash remains in an urn were given back their family members' remains, decomposing remains from this, and finding that in the urn that they had was just mixed cement. That's messed up, demented. What are you doing? Wow. Why are you I have no idea. What do you do with that many? How do you get that many bodies? It's just disgusting. And the amount of negligence for them to get to this extreme, to go so far that they have no refrigeration for this, no care for the facilities, no care for the deceased of family members. There's only been about 30 of the family members that have been returned to their family. So the rest they're still working on identifying. Yeah,
they're probably too badly decomposed to identify. Wow.
I mean, you think months in a room with other bodies, just
the illnesses and diseases that could come from that is just, and that's why you have the 24-hour period.
Even just the ground contamination around that facility for the neighborhoods. Yeah. there's a lot of things that could be really, really bad because of this situation here. Wow. And it's a 2,500 square foot building, so it's not that big to hold that many bodies that were found. You know, that's like a
wow.
It's like an auto shop full of bodies. Not even an auto shop. That auto shops are bigger.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's the size of our entire office here. Could you imagine having
200 bodies plus whoever is stacking them?
Could you imagine having that here?
It's disturbing. It's disgusting. But thank goodness that they found this and these people have been arrested. And I pray that they can identify. They've been able to also use dental records and things like that.
Yeah.
But that these families can be returned and have a proper service for their. Honor them the right way. Yeah. So anyway, I know that that's a really bad note, but the lesson learned is don't be money motivated and make sure that when you commit to something, you do what you say you're going to do and not just stack the bodies in the back.
Yeah. Wow. I have no words.
I honestly, I don't either. I don't know, other than, so Governor Jared Polis, he issued a verbal disaster declaration and just apologized to the families about this happening. Literally bringing together state and federal bureaus of investigation and 3 county coroner's offices, state emergency management, and state and local police agencies, including an agency that has been... or they were dispatched for disasters like 9/11. So like to think that they have to dispatch that on a national level for a facility down in south of Colorado Springs is just disturbing. So, on a lighter note, I don't know if I could, I'm not sure I could pick this back up again, but
learn how to manage your money better so you don't end up in a situation where you think that this is tenable.
It is not tenable. It is despicable. And honestly, it's not worth it to try to do something like this. When you think about making money, when you think about creative ways, guys, this is not creative. This is disgusting, disturbing, and you should go to jail. Or any other things that are illegal means to be able to produce money is illegal for a reason. Don't do it. Even if it seems like it could be possible and you see the scenarios, I promise you, don't do it. You will get caught. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, maybe rake some leaves, mow some lawns, be friends with your neighbors and clean up some trash. All of them are going to be happy. Even if it's a shiny nickel from the grandma down the street, it's still a little bit further. And honestly, it's not just the shiny nickel that you did. Now you have a customer for life. Yep. So look at it that well. I mean, it's an old lady down the street, so there's a possibility she's probably at this funeral home.
Okay, that took a dark turn right there.
I just brought it back.
We're keeping it positive.
Anyway, be creative. Be creative.
Just get to the end.
We need to come to the end of our show. But hey, life's too short. Keep laughing and keep learning. And remember, idiots have way more fun.
Check your shoes.